Singh. We are, of course, building up to the big NewsX exclusive of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Yes, PM Narendra Modi has joined us for an exclusive conversation in the midst of the Lok Sabha election campaigning. That exclusive interview you can, of course, catch at 9 p.m. on all our ITV network channels, on NewsX, on India News, on our regional channels, and of course our social media platforms. In fact, as we speak, the Prime Minister's official page has also put it out. And joining us, of course, are the three individuals who interviewed the Prime Minister. We also have our senior editors of ITV Network joining us. We're going to be decoding what the main takeaways of this conversation were and also playing out some excerpts for you as well. Let me begin with you first, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit Sharma, on what you believe the main takeaways of what the PM said was. What do you believe was the most interesting aspect of what he said in this exclusive conversation?
I think he tackled all the questions pretty much head on, and that was very, very important. He spoke about job creations and his plan for the third term. He also spoke about the wealth redistribution scheme. He spoke about those aspects of the opposition where he critiqued their proposals to mislead the public, which was very, very important because he was conscious of the fact that he was addressing a very wide audience, and the forcefulness with which the Prime Minister conveys and the conviction with which he conveys his opinions are very, very significant because he's very clear in the thought process. And Rishabh, you noticed that he was very, very clear, and he knew his figures and facts bang on point. So I think that's my major takeaway.
Absolutely. The facts and figures were there for all to see. Of course, the Prime Minister speaking about the 100% saturation of the schemes as well that he's, of course, got for the people of the country. Rana Yashwant, come in here on what stood out for you. What do you believe, was the most interesting aspect of this interview and what the PM said for you?
सबसे जो इम्पॉर्टेंट बात है वो ये है उदय की जो पूरा माहौल होता है ना उसको बहुत लाइट करते हैं। आपके साथ इंटरव्यू के पहले जो इंटरेक्शन हो जाता है उसमें वो प्रेशर जो होता है उसको हटा देते हैं, फिर आप इंटरव्यू करने और उनसे बात करने की स्थिति में आ जाते हैं। और बहुत अच्छी बात है उनकी, जब आप उनसे मिलते हैं तो वो एक बहुत ही आपके साथ उनका जो इंटरेक्शन होता है उसने आपके पूरे माहौल को जो है ना वो लाइट कर देता है। और सवाल जो अभी अश्वा जी कह रही थी कि सवाल कोई भी हो एक लॉजिकल कंक्लूशन तक ले जाते हैं कि जवाब देते हैं, और डेटा बेस्ड है। अश्वा जी भी कह रही थी कि वो डेटा ज़रूर रखते हैं और एक के बाद दूसरी बात तीसरी बात तो इंटर रिलेटेड होती हैं और एक लॉजिकल कंक्लूशन तक वो अपनी बात को ले जाते हैं, बहुत कन्विंसिंग साउंड करते हैं।
And should we tell the story of Rana ji's last minute jog to make sure he reached the interview on time because his flight got delayed. Rana ji, I think कितने किलोमीटर आप literally भागते हुए आए उस टाइम में?
अच्छी बात क्या है कि मैं जब लैंड किया तो ठीक है उसके बाद पीएम लैंड कर रहे थे तो पूरा इलाका जो था सील्ड था और वहाँ फोर्सेस थी, तो मैं एयरपोर्ट से बाहर पैदल चलता हुआ 1.5 किलोमीटर के आसपास आया, 2 किलोमीटर के आसपास। तो जहाँ ट्रैफिक था लोग रुके हुए थे, मैंने एक आदमी से कहा कि मुझे बीजेपी ऑफिस जाना है। तो उसने कहा कि क्यों? मैंने कहा कि बस जाना, पीएम का इंटरव्यू है। उसने पीछे मुड़ के देखा, बोला कि आप मोदी जी का इंटरव्यू करने के लिए आए? हम कहा हाँ। फिर उसने मुझे बिठाया, कुछ नहीं पूछा, बिठाया, कहा कि सर आप थोड़ा सा मेरी मत कीजिए, गाड़ी मेरी बाइक जो पीछे हो जाए। तो हम उल्टे ट्रैफिक में जहाँ था ना तो हमने लोगों को हटाना शुरू किया। 50 मिनट के बाद हम बाहर निकले। उसके बाद उस आदमी ने उस शहर में जहाँ भीड़ थी किसी तरीके से जा कर के, और बीजेपी ऑफिस से ठीक 1.5 किलोमीटर पहले फिर वहाँ ब्लॉक था, तो पुलिस फोर्सेस ने कहा कि नहीं अब यहाँ सर हम इधर तो नहीं जा सकते आप। तो फिर मैं वहाँ से उतरा, फिर 1.5 किलोमीटर जो है बीजेपी ऑफिस तक मैं भागता हुआ पहुँचा। जब पहुँचा तो एसपी जी के लोग थे, तो उन्होंने कहा कि सर बहुत देर है, बहुत देर कर दिया। हम कहा हाँ ऐसे है, लेकिन वो फिर अंदर तक हम गए।
And of course the other side story which we have to tell you before the interview is of course you heard Rana ji's proficiency in Hindi. I had just a 3-line introduction, okay, which I had to get right. And I promise you, I've rehearsed it 500. I've not rehearsed that 3-line introduction so often as I probably did. But Aishwarya ji, in the whole experience, it was very professionally organized. The team was on point. Our camera crew were there for 8 hours. They literally emptied out the entire office to accommodate, make sure the interview was set up well, and they were doing that across the board, very professionally organized.
I think a great deal of the thing which I found very interesting, despite his busy schedule, Rishabh, the most important point was the interview began on time, which you don't expect for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, because he had gone to Puri at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And our interview was scheduled at 8. So that's 14 hours later is the schedule. Then he had meetings afterwards. So it began on time. But, you know, the vibe that you got was everything was very professionally organized. You know, there was, he was very, very upfront, very cordial to speak to, and it was pretty well sorted. Let me quickly get in Professor Nalapath, who's joining us on the broadcast. Professor Nalapath, you had a chance to go through the transcript of the interview, which we'll be publishing shortly. Of course, the paper will be carrying it on Sunday as well. You know, we were all ideating together on what is the questions we need to ask and what you know, is the themology that we need to put in. What do you make of the answers we've got?
Well, I think what you can make out is that, frankly, Narendra Modi is a man on a mission. It's not just a vocation for him. Politics is not a career. Politics is a mission. And what is that mission? That mission is, frankly, very much related to the connect and the empathy that he feels for the ordinary people of India. And I think that empathy and that connect comes through very much in that interview, as also, frankly, his combative spirit. He's not an individual to allow any kind of an unanswered question.
Yes.
He's not an individual to take a challenge lying down, and combative in a very friendly way, and that also comes out. So, frankly, what you have captured is the essence of Narendra Modi, and I think you have captured why you're seen in 2014, 2019, and most likely in 2020.
Of course, Professor Nalapath, who's been doing this for much longer than probably all of us combined. Another, of course, our executive director is joining us. Priya Sehgal ji, you know, you texted me a bit earlier because you've also gone through the transcript. And if I can take the privilege, you say you got a lot out of the interview, given the interview, of course, was just over 20 minutes. What do you think the key highlights were?
Rishabh, exactly. I saw the transcript and I'm waiting to see the interview. But I think, you know, you got him to address all the key questions, the narratives that are building in this election, you know, whether it was the charge of reservations, you know, we've been talking about minority appeasement. The Congress has, of course, been accusing them of communalism and playing the Hindu-Muslim card. So he, of course, lobbed the ball back in the Congress court, saying that what I am doing is actually, you know, secularism, and what the Congress is doing is secularism in the garb of appeasement. I thought that, you know, is very Modi-esque the way he said it. And he, of course, traced it back to Manmohan Singh's famous first right of minorities issue, which the Congress is still trying to counter it. In fact, I had a conversation with Shashi Tharoor recently, and I lobbed that question back to him. And he, of course, says now they're going to rake back, you know, why are they going to the past? We have had 8 years of government after that. Why are they still going on about that? But that point is still very much there, dominant in the narrative.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, and
in fact, that would be the first opposition reaction to this big PM interview as well, Priya. Because you've done that today.
Let's take an opportunity. I just want to play out a snippet. Okay, just let's listen in. You got to get a flavor of this interview, which we're going to play out. We're going to listen it for just for 15 seconds. And I want to come back to, of course, Joyita, Aishwarya ji, and Megha and the rest of our colleagues. Let's listen in.
तो संपत्ति पर अधिकार किसका होगा? जो मनमोहन सिंह जी कहा था उनका होगा। अगर ये सीधा सीधा पूरा कैनवास पर रखो तो इसका लॉजिक यही निकलता है, ये देश कैसे स्वीकार करेगा? दूसरा, क्या दुनिया के किसी डेवलपिंग कंट्री ने इस प्रकार का पागलपन किया है क्या?
You know, so Aishwarya ji, you can clearly tell that a conversation is going on about appeasement and secularism, but he's saying no, it's actually communalism. The other side is not doing appeasement. They are in fact guilty of default communalism.
I think that was a very, very important point that he made, and it was a very bold point that he made, and because I think he wanted to address this point because he has felt that the opposition always tries to charge back at him, saying secularism in danger and secularism in danger. But he has questioned the definition of secularism of the opposition, most importantly, and he has said that in fact it's not secularism, but it's actually communalism in a different form. And so I think he's thrown the ball right back at you, which makes it very interesting.
Yeah, so there are a few highlights, of course, in an interview, and that's certainly one of them, okay? Because he says secularism ka niqab. When he speaks of economics, he talks about pagalpan. So let me bring Joyita in on that. Joyita, there is a conversation that needs to happen for the balanced two phases. But there is a political conversation. But as Professor Alapat was saying, this is a person representing himself. There might be a politician, Narendra Modi, but there's also the administrator, Narendra Modi, coming out. When he's talking about 100% saturation, when he's talking about I want to build this, the taps, there is administrator Narendra Modi in this as well.
Well, yes, you see, and especially when you are looking at when he's talking about, what the food grain situation, he's talking about what was happening earlier with the food grains. Now, Manmohan Singh was saying it is not possible to distribute, and what Mr. Modi's government has done that, the distribution is happening. So the whole thing, the focus is, and that is what Prime Minister Modi is also about, common sense solution to problems that will be reaching, basically the grassroots problems that can be solved with absolute solutions, which perhaps no one has thought of, but it is absolutely possible and doable. So when you have got food grains rotting, why aren't you distributing them to the people?
That's not the answer I was honestly expecting to come out of that question. Because the question was this, ladies and gentlemen, that if you're having 25 crore people who come out of poverty, then why do you need to give 80 crore people free grain? And that's a question that seems okay, yeah, that seems logical. But his answer was, when 15 years ago the grain was rotting in the godowns, and the Supreme Court asked the government, why don't you distribute the grain to the poor? There's a practicality in this. And okay, I want to touch upon one more point, and this happened, Ranaji, towards the end of this interview, people get to see. When he speaks about 100% logic, 100% plan, that जब आप 100% plan करो तो discrimination वहीं पर गायब.
हाँ, इस बात से मैं व्यक्तिगत तौर पे सहमत हूँ। उन्होंने कहा कि जो सरकार की बेनिफिशियरी स्कीम्स हैं, जो कल्याणकारी योजनाएं होती हैं, उसमें जब आप कहते हैं कि ज़रूरतमंद के लिए है, जो लाल कार्डधारी है, तो वो कोई भी हो सकता है, किसी भी जाति का, धर्म का है। और मैं कहता हूँ कि अनाज सबके यहाँ जाएगा, मैं कहता हूँ रसोई गैस सबके यहाँ सिलेंडर जाएगा, बिजली सबके यहाँ जाएगी, मकान मिलेगा, शौचालय मिलेगा। तो ये जो हकदार लोग हैं उसमें कहीं कोई जाति नहीं है, जो है उस वर्ग में उसके पास जाएगा। इसलिए 100% का हम सवाल उठाते हैं। मैंने कभी भी उसको सेग्रीगेट नहीं किया है और ये बात भी बिल्कुल सही है।
And this, ladies and gentlemen, okay, is one emphatic point that was made by the Prime Minister, but this is the only, Megha, and because we've done the ground reports on this, Megha, we've done it one year ago. When we did the ground reports of people who happen to be, because anywhere in the country you go, you're going to meet Muslims, you're going to meet Christians, you're going to meet Hindus. And if you do, listen, have you got a house? There will be a Hindu who got a house and a Muslim who got a house. And when we did the ground report, we got the anecdotal thing. So the one thing that he has said, 15 years as Chief Minister, plus 10 years as Prime Minister, not one person, not even the opposition, has ever said that one individual was discriminated because of his identity. They've all got schemes. And our anecdotal evidence of the reportage we've done, Megha, proves this.
No, absolutely. Whether, we talk about the Awas Yojana, we talk about the Mudra loans, especially how the women and Muslim women who were the beneficiaries of these loans, speaking about the Swanidhi Yojana, a lot of Muslim women who have gotten these guarantee-free loans, low interest loans, and therefore that's exactly why when the Prime Minister speaks about whether I was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, you spoke about that, whether I'm the Prime Minister for the last 10 years, there has been development, there has been 100% saturation that is in provision of the scheme. So he's also speaking about 100% delivery. And when he sees that if the goal is 100% delivery, where is the question of discrimination?
Okay, speaking of candid confessions, I also have a candid confession to make. I had lost track of time, and there was a camera person in front of me doing this And I got confused what he meant by this, whether that was a particular time slot. So actually the Prime Minister was willing to sit down for a couple of more minutes. If you think why the interview is 20 minutes, is because primarily I lost track of time. We could have easily got a couple of questions or a couple of minutes out of him. Well done on the candid side. Let me get Professor Nalapat back on this. Professor Nalapat, you know, there is about substance, there is about style, then there is about vision, okay? Now, in terms of a vision statement, in what you're reading of the transcript and hearing of this interview, what insights are we sort of getting of potentially a Modi 3.0?
Well, look, let me say what Prime Minister Modi did. One of the first things he did was to change a system whereby the railways gave greater priority to the transportation of marble than they did to the transportation of vegetables and food grain. I mean, marble, it's not going to rot. Vegetables and food grains will rot. But sidings with vegetables and food grains were rotting while marble was going through in trains. One of the first things he did was change that. So the point is, he approaches issues with commonsensical solutions. Solutions that ought to be obvious to anybody, but which frankly have not been, and they're not been implemented. So now that is where this 100% comes in. If 100% is a complete negation of two-nation theory. Now, when you differentiate and say you're going to give this much to minorities or something like that, you're essentially harking back to the two-nation theory, which is an absurd theory.
Yes.
Okay. The reality is that our DNA is common. Whether you're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Sikh, whatever, the DNA is common. And this government's policies are based on that common DNA, and their policies are for everybody, irrespective of faith.
Okay, so that is the distillation that a sabka saath, sabka vikas, is not just a political slogan. It is a motif to work by. Now, let me pick Aishwarya ji's brain on this, because you asked ma'am the question on jobs. It's a crucial issue for a person out there. By the way, if you're looking for a job, we are hiring, okay? But for a person out there who's hunting for a job or can't find one in his particular city or particular area, that's the biggest concern. Now, again, the practicality of the PM saying that, look, listen, we've heard this before, that listen, when you're building the road, but that you generate jobs. Now, of course, he spoke of this Koch report, which we just debated.
I think he spoke extensively about his plan for job creation, in the sense where he's saying that we have to have an outlook of being job providers and job creators, creating new businesses. And I think that is the approach that he wants for new India under Modi, is that an India where you are generating employment for a couple of people. And he spoke about women getting interest-free loans, about a lot of people, street vendors getting interest-free loans, and they providing jobs, and they extending it a great deal. So I think here is a man with a plan, and he knows very clearly what to do. He spoke about that how different implementation of different schemes is also an exercise in job creation.
Yes. No, it's an implementational scheme, because you build the houses, and that's the mathematics that the report has done. If you build 4 crore houses, how many person hours is that taking? And
in fact, we have that excerpt. Let's play that out. It's another excerpt from this interview today on that aspect.
मेरे 2 सिद्धांत हैं। एक 100% सैचुरेशन। अगर मान लीजिए गरीब को घर देना, तो टुकड़ों में मत करो, 100% सोचो। जब 100% होता है तो फिर भेदभाव कहाँ आता है भाई?
So that was, of course, what the Prime Minister weighed in on. Before we go back to
I just want to touch in on this, because the anecdotal test, Megha, you did the documentary on the Swanidhi. Did people actually get loans? Did we find street vendors who said, yes, I got a few rupees?
Yeah, and our reporters went out across the country in Madhya Pradesh, in Uttar Pradesh. We were a number of reporters who were in Noida, in Ghaziabad, in Gurgaon, and it wasn't a difficult task for them to hunt these people down, the beneficiaries. So any locality that they went to. In fact, over here at the place that we are, the Sabzi Mandi that we are, and you go down, and I went over there to shoot my documentary, and I spoke to the people, and there were many of these beneficiaries. So
the vendors in our immediate neighborhood have got loans.
Everybody got the benefits.
So Joyita, on a larger scheme, have we seen a trend that when the statistics come out that these many crore houses and these many crore toilets have been built, that both the statistics and the anecdotal evidence says that yes, it's largely true?
Yes, you see, there is always there is some sort of a skepticism about the numbers that are published by the government. But what happens in this case, whatever numbers that the government has been publishing, there is actual evidence of it. I had earlier mentioned also on NewsX, if you remember, Rishabh, about the Lakhpati Didi scheme in particular. You know, I was surprised to see there was a this Swannirbhar fair that was happening in Delhi NCR.
Yes.
So I had gone there, and I was surprised to see the number of women that had come from all across the country, and all of them were part of that Lakhpati Didi scheme.
Yes.
And all of them, many of them had done mudra loans.
The difference between Lakhpati Didi, and this is an ideological difference, means we will train you and maybe provide you a drone, okay, so that you can earn a lakh, versus the Congress says we will give you a lakh. Then of course you do the math. If you give 10,000 people 1 lakh, that's 10,000 lakhs, okay. If you give 2 crore people 1 lakh, you know, after a point you're heading into a few lakh crores and you can't afford it. Okay, let me ask the hot potato question to Priya Sehgal. Priya, what part of this do you suspect is going to get the goat of the opposition the most?
Well, obviously the charge that it is the Congress that is playing communal politics and not the BJP, because that kind of turns the whole entire narrative of the opposition on its head. Because, you know, that is the main thing that the opposition has been saying, that you are bringing Ram, you are bringing Hinduism, you are bringing Hindutva, not even Hinduism, you are talking Ram temple, you are talking religion when we want to talk development. You know, the Congress in fact very famously said on one of my shows that the BJP's username is development, but their password is Hindutva. So now the Prime Minister's lobbed that ball right back into their court and saying, hey, I am not doing communal politics. What you are calling secular is actually communal politics.
Okay.
And then he goes on to, you know, trace it to the Manmohan Singh example and the other anecdote. Yeah, Rishabh, let me finish once.
Yeah, please.
And the other example that he gave also was the fact that, you know, when he talked about the distribution of resources, that it is not going to be based on minority. Now, in fact, he again lobbed the ball back in the Congress saying, you are going to give quotas on the basis of minority. And instead, you are accusing, you know, the BJP of giving resources on the basis of minorities. So he's taken the argument he's taken the dominant narrative of this election and countered it with his own spin and his own explanation.
Yes.
And the fact, the body language in the clips that he showed us, showed him that, you know, he was pretty comfortable, and, you know, despite the day of election, the body language showed a very positive side.
So he's flipped the conversation, and someone who's literally written the book on the subject when it comes to UP is sitting with me. Aishwarya ji, you saw the flip happening, that he's saying that, look, it's these people who are practicing communalism and accusing us of practicing communalism. And of course, the imputation being that for 75 years is the Hindus who are being discriminated against. You can't build the Ram Mandir, you can't interfere in other personal laws, you can't interfere in Waqf board policies. What has been your research experience on this?
My research experience, especially on the question of, because I look into independent India and the partition and the cause of the Hindu refugees, it is almost very, very strange that the Congress, and nobody knows about this, that on the first election there were speeches which were made by Nehru, by members of the Congress party, which had very, very religious undertones to compel you to vote for the Congress in the election. And the first general election was a kind of a loyalty test that was kind of being played out. And also for the cause of refugees, Nehru himself constantly referred to the plight of Muslim refugees leaving for Pakistan, although the chief ministers from Bengal and Punjab were constantly sending letters to the Prime Minister and his office saying that the Hindu refugees is also an equally important concern.
Yeah.
and no one really addressed it.
Yeah, so indicative that there is some historical evidence to back this up. Of course, then of course it's a matter of conversation. Okay, we are short of time, so I'm going to do a quick review. Rana ji, आपके लिए इसमें what was the most interesting point?
सबसे जो दिलचस्प बात है कि उन्होंने कहा कि देखिए ये जो पूरा चुनाव है ये पार्टियां नहीं लड़ रही हैं, ये लोग लड़ रहे हैं और लोगों ने अपना फैसला कर लिया है। एक प्रधानमंत्री का अपने कार्यकाल 10 साल के कार्यकाल के दौरान लोगों के साथ इस तरह का जुड़ाव महसूस करना और उनके ऊपर इस तरह से भरोसा रखना कि यह जो जनता है उसने अपना फैसला तय कर रखा है।
One more aspect, in fact, Rishabh, that hasn't been touched was another question on the Ram Mandir as well. I think that was posed as well, where the Prime Minister contrasted the behavior of opposition parties with Iqbal Ansari. Isn't that correct, Rana ji?
Exactly.
क्या कहा?
उन्होंने ये कहा कि देखिए इकबाल अंसारी का जिक्र आता है, वो 2 पुश्तों से अयोध्या मामले में लड़ाई लड़ रहे थे, अदालती लड़ाई लड़ रहे थे, लेकिन जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने फैसला दे दिया तो उन्होंने उसकी कदर की, उसका सम्मान किया। हमने शिलान्यास में बुलाया, मतलब वहाँ जो मंदिर बनाने समिति है उससे शिलान्यास में बुलाया, वो गए, उन्होंने मंदिर के उद्घाटन पे बुलाया, वो वहाँ गए, लेकिन कुछ पार्टियों को, सब पार्टियों को भेजा गया, कांग्रेस से इशारा था, उनको जो निमंत्रण गया उन्होंने उसको स्वीकार नहीं किया। तो आप समझिए कि ये जो माइंडसेट है ये क्या है और कम्युनिज्म क्या है।
The ultimate irony. Okay, Joyita, your quick big takeaway.
Well, the quick big takeaway among the several, I would say, is that, again, I'm going to talk about that common sense, practical solutions to problems that he can bring into the grassroots. And yes, it is the people. It is the people's election. It is the people who will ensure
so
that.
So that's the part you're going to see in quotations on the Sunday Guardian this Sunday in the transcript. Priya, your quick big takeaway.
I think game on, really. People were saying that the opposition is arresting the initiative. Here's what someone, as Aishwarya said, this is a man with a plan. He definitely is in control, knows what he's talking about. He's already talking ahead. I think the election is something that's an interruption in his 3-term governance record. He's talking about his future plans, what he's done, and he's moving on. So I think the naysayers or those who think there will be a hung thing or the Prime Minister won't get the mandate, I think he's given his this thing. He's a very confident, assured person on the street.
Well, you get to find out in exactly 30 minutes. Our conversation continues on the other side of the break. The interview, of course, coming up and streaming online. And it's going to be streaming online on NewsX handles all over the place. So you can watch it and get a glimpse of, in detail, of what the conversation we've been having in the conversation that we've had with the Prime Minister a few hours ago. I thank all the senior editorial team of the network. We've already met the senior team from NewsX and we've had this conversation. And of course, the interview is with Aishwarya ji and Rana ji, who are sitting with me. And you can watch it simulcast on India News, where we're going to continue this conversation on the other side of the break. See you in a couple of minutes.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.